The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
International Podcast Day is September 30th, and you can help spread the word. International Podcast Day is dedicated to promoting podcasting worldwide. You may be asking, what can I do to get involved? It's pretty simple. First, head over to internationalpodcastday.com and check the suggestions. Second, use hashtag Podcast Day to join in the conversation. Remember September 30th. Now, let's start the conversation.
You've always got time for Short Time.
Hey, it's Mario Lopez.
David Taylor.
Fred Metcalf. Johnny Hendricks. Tony Ramos. Bubba J.
Mike Golick.
Matthew Modine. The one and only Chael Sonnen. And you are listening to the one and only Short Time Wrestling Podcast by the often imitated and never duplicated Jason Bryant.
Episode 280 of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, and we talk with all kinds of people here, and whether their mental stability is in question or not, and today we're going to find that out with why on earth somebody wants to ride over 1,000 miles, and that individual is Sacred Heart head coach Andy Lausier. Andy, your second appearance on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. First of all, welcome back. And second of all, you're going to ride over 1,000 miles on a bike. Okay. What is your problem, man?
Yeah, I've been hearing that question a lot lately, but thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure. You are a staple of my morning or my daily commute to Sacred Heart University, and I'm sure that I will be you'll be a staple on my ride to St. Louis here in the next few weeks.
Well, we do got 14 shows on the network, so there is no shortage. I'm wondering how many hours have you calculated how long the ride is going to be in terms of hours? Because for those who are wondering what the heck we're talking about, last year, Andy and his compatriot Derek Moore, the assistant at Sacred Heart, they did a march to Madison Square Garden where over 3 days they ran from Fairfield, Connecticut, where Sacred Heart University is located, in case you did not know that. The only Catholic Division I wrestling program in the country, by the way. 60 miles to Madison Square Garden. Now, with St. Louis, that's not exactly you and Coach Moore can't take like 3 weeks off to run to St. Louis. So you're spinning to St. Louis at riding4wrestling.com. And let's just talk about first last year, the idea to the march to Madison Square Garden, and then why on earth would you say, all right, let's go to St. Louis. You didn't even try the buffer. You didn't even go, let's jump to let's lounge to Lewisburg for the EIWA championships.
Lounge to Lewisburg. I'll answer your questions in reverse order. Why? I guess to put it bluntly, is I'm a challenge seeker. It's the exact reason that I came to Sacred Heart University and took over the worst Division I program in 2012. With my role as the head coach at Sacred Heart, I have a huge financial responsibility. And we do not have unlimited resources at Sacred Heart. So I need to build our reserve account on a yearly basis to help supplement our operating budget. In my first 3 years, we really leaned on the shoulders of major gift donors. And that generosity is really what served as a catalyst to get Sacred Heart Wrestling moving in the right direction. But after 3 years, that well kind of dried up. And simultaneously last year, we were hit with a budget cut. And so we were forced to kind of come up with a creative way to raise some money for the program. And it just, coincidentally happened that nationals were being held at Madison Square Garden. So we thought, what if we try and do a run-a-thon and get people to make a pledge per mile? And it turned out to be a really successful little campaign. Within the time frame of about 4 to 5 weeks, we raised $20,000. And what I really learned was that we didn't have a clue what we were doing, but kind of a platform opened up for us to do something bigger and better. So I've known from the second that I finished the run to Madison Square Garden last year that I wanted to do something, again, that would be bigger and better and more impactful for Sacred Heart Wrestling.
And when you say bigger and impactful, obviously the key when you're saying, the March to Madison Square Garden, you would have loved to have had an athlete there. You actually came pretty close to getting an athlete qualified. Now, St. Louis, being in the central part of the country, it's kind of one of those places where people know nationals are going to be. They make their plans. Once they, all right, St. Louis, we know where we're going to stay. We're going to do the same thing. But when it comes to a fundraising aspect, probably a little more of an affordable trip, even though a lot more people could have driven from Fairfield to Madison Square Garden. Just parking alone is like a plane ticket when you go to St. Louis. So when you're talking about raising the money for St. Louis, what has changed? What is the difference between this bike ride for 1,000 miles versus a run for 60?
Well, there are a lot of differences, but I think the primary differences are, one, we leaned on some professional expertise in terms of campaign management, marketing, and promotion. So we were able to use the services of Coy Cooper, who has a fantastic reputation in the wrestling community, and the work that he's done has been immeasurable in moving this entire campaign forward. The other thing is we've been able to get some sponsors on board for this year's campaign. So I think that adds a real sense of legitimacy to what we're doing. Compound Athletics and Compound Clothing has come on board as a sponsor, and they really believed in what we were doing. And then Carter Mario Injury Lawyers, who's based out of Connecticut. They're the largest law firm in New England. And Carter's a former wrestler for the University of North Carolina, has been a huge supporter of Sacred Heart Wrestling. And then I just think the overall physical challenge is a lot bigger. So it's created more interest. It's certainly been much more of a demand on me physically and mentally, but that's exactly what I've loved about this whole process. And, a lot of people that I've met with that have done something similar, whether it's been riding across the United States or I met with someone that ran across the United States in 5 months, told me that this is going to be a once in a lifetime experience for me, that I'll come back a different person. So I'm really excited for the own personal journey that I'm going to experience here as well.
Now, what do you know? What is your background with cycling or riding? I mean, is this something that you've actually done before? So you've got to bring extra tires, and you're going to have flats, and you're going to have a support vehicle behind you. I mean, what do you know about actually riding a bike this distance?
I don't know a whole lot other than what I've learned from people that have done something similar, or watching some documentaries on Netflix or YouTube. I was introduced to cycling 2 years ago by our athletic director, Bobby Valentine, and at the time he challenged me to do a 100-mile charity ride with him. I thought that sounded very interesting. I had no idea that people rode a bicycle that far. And as I started training for it, I realized that it was a heck of a lot harder than I anticipated. And so that really magnetically drew me to this sport of cycling. And since then, I've really become hooked. And along the way, it's something that I realized I'm pretty good at, especially when it comes to the endurance side of it, the ultra endurance side. And so it all just kind of meshed together as something that I thought would be a great fundraising and awareness campaign for Sacred Heart Wrestling. But there are, as much planning as I've done, there's two things. One is you can't possibly know how you're going to feel. You can't do the actual event. So, with a marathon, you run typically up to, 24 to 23, 25 miles of a marathon. So you have a pretty good idea of how you're going to feel. The longest ride that I've done in one stretch is 209 miles. So there's no way that I can kind of survey to see what it would feel like at 900 to 1,000 miles on the sixth day. And then just, I'm sure little things are going to pop up, things that we didn't prepare for in terms of, construction in the road, or a bridge is closed and we have to take a detour and add miles onto the ride when it's raining out, or, the conditions are less than favorable. So I feel like I'm well prepared, but I also know that I'm going to have to be flexible and I'm going to have to adjust during the course of the ride.
Yeah, might I suggest using the app Waze? That actually has actually a pretty good element to it, with actually other people using it to show you the best way to go places, believe it or not. Like, we used it in Rio, and it's like, nope, traffic's backed up, go this way. It's even a little more robust than Google Apps or Google Maps in that respect. So little side note for you there. Now, as it relates to the ride, I'm doing some quick math courtesy of my calculator here. 7 days, it's 1,116 miles from Fairfield to St. Louis. That's about 158 miles a day and change, depending on what you're going to do. You had said you'd gone 200 miles as the longest run. So 158, how long are we talking these rides expecting? I mean, how many hours a day do you expect to be on the road here?
Yeah, the shortest day is about 140 miles, and then I have a couple days that are going to be right around 170 miles. Time-wise, that'll roll out anywhere from 9 to 12 to 13 hours a day. The difference in time is the amount of elevation that I'll be forced to climb in each day. So the front end of the ride, as I go through Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, is really, really hilly. But obviously, then once I get into Ohio, things start to flatten out a little bit.
Yeah, so when you plan the route here, you want to make the shortest distance, but you also got to deal with those elevations, like going through the Appalachians and parts of West Virginia and Western PA. It's not just hilly. I mean, you got some pretty serious elevation changes there. What made the track you have mapped out the most ideal in terms of balancing that distance plus the strain of the elevation?
Probably the combination of trying to make the route as direct as possible, and then finding roads that are rider friendly. Obviously, you can't take a bike on interstates or highways, so it was a very long process to develop the route. It took months and months of research and mapping it out. So we're pretty confident in what we've planned out. But again, we haven't driven the route, we haven't ridden the route, so we're just we're going off of technology here a little bit. And so we know that we're going to have to make adjustments along the way.
And you're not the only one that's going to be dealing with this, as the members of the team will be riding with you in spirit, but also on a bike back in Connecticut. They're going to cycle an hour relay segments for 24 hours around the clock for 7 straight days. I mean, obviously class time is going to be a situation with some of these guys, but how did you convince the team members to be like, all right, yeah, it's not just me and Coach Moore this time. You guys are in this too.
Yeah, that's what the guys are so awesome. And that's probably my favorite part of this campaign is that it's really an integrated team effort. And I didn't have to convince them at all. When I shared with them the idea late last spring, they were so excited. They thought it sounded really cool and they couldn't wait to be a part of it. And that was one of the areas that I realized we kind of missed out on a little bit last year. One of the neatest aspects was that the guys came down to Central Park last year and they finished off the final 4 miles of the run with us. And that was really one of my biggest goals in this year's campaign, was to make it a very inclusive effort and experience for our student athletes. So we built out this master schedule. Coach Moore did a great job of working around everyone's classes and things like that. But we're going to have someone on a bike at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning. They're going to be outside and they're going to have to going, through their own sessions of sacrifice and investment for Sacred Heart Wrestling.
Now, when last year's, March to MSG finished up, you guys got a lot of media play there in that region, in the tri-state area. How much did that really help, not just with the fundraising, but actual awareness that, hey, 1, we're doing something cool. 2, we're wrestlers. And 3, oh, by the way, we have a wrestling program at Sacred Heart, because, even wrestling people might not know this.
You're absolutely right. And I think last year, I think that you would have to say that awareness was the most successful piece of last year's campaign. The money we raised was great and it was significant for our program, but it was really, really hard to put a dollar value on the awareness for Sacred Heart Wrestling. And so what I've noticed is it's helped so significantly in launching this year's campaign, because people already have a point of reference to go back to. Oh, I've heard of Sacred Heart Wrestling before, or, oh yeah, I kind of remember that march at Madison Square Garden last year.
And when we look at the donation goals, you said you raised $20,000 this year. We go to riding and the number 4 wrestling.com, and you'll see the contribute link right down to support the campaign. You can donate now at the front. As I look at the page right now via crowdrise.com, you're already in a really good spot for fundraising, but you set a goal of $100,000. Why that number?
When I was working with our development officer in athletics, we were kind of planning out a way to take some pressure off of our operating budget for the next 5 to 10 years. So yeah, the $100,000 wasn't just an arbitrary number. It was something we really built out from a budget standpoint. And we're going to hit that goal, and we're going to go past that goal. Right now, what we have on CrowdRise doesn't represent all the money that we currently have raised or pledged. I think on CrowdRise, as of today, we're probably just over $45,000. But people are also making contributions directly to Sacred Heart University. So we have a significant amount of money, upwards of $10,000 in there. And we're in the middle right now of a $25,000 match campaign. So every dollar that's raised for the next $25,000 will be matched.
So when you look at all this fundraising that goes with it, I mean, what are other programs doing at Sacred Heart to try to raise money? And what does Bobby Valentine think about what you guys are doing with wrestling specifically to be like, hey, you guys are definitely worthy of this university support?
Well, yeah, Bobby V has totally been on board. And so the first person that I really had to convince was Bobby. I mean, he's my boss. And so, I scheduled a meeting with him and really kind of launched into a well-prepared presentation. And I was really nervous. I didn't know how he'd respond just because this was so much bigger than the March to MSG. I wasn't more than, a couple of sentences into this, well-crafted speech of mine until he cut me off and he said, "You're crazy." And there was this kind of awkward moment of silence. And I was like, he's shutting me down. And then he said, "I love it."
Yeah, this is a guy, Bobby Valentine, calling you crazy, coming from Bobby Valentine is like, that's kind of a compliment, actually, knowing his reputation as a baseball manager.
I suppose that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, so he's been fully on board. He's helped engage some of his friends and some of his colleagues to help make contributions. But yeah, we have, 32 Division I sports at Sacred Heart University. It's an interesting model. So all the coaches there work really, really, really hard, to help advance the financial situation of their programs.
Now, as we look at the program itself now, last year, no qualifiers to the NCAA championships, although you had 3 placers at the EIWA championships, and arguably your best wrestler you lost to a season-ending injury back in January. That was Conn and Schuster. And when you look at the performance last year with a 7th and 2 8s, that people look at that and be like, okay, you were 12th out of whatever, and you had 3 low finishers. For Sacred Heart, you got to crawl before you can walk. And let's talk about the performance last year and how those performances are really leading to this year. You only had 1 senior on the roster last year, and now you've got the whole team essentially coming back. I mean, what was the big building blocks last year that were set that makes 2016-17 going to be that much more successful for Pioneer Wrestling?
Well, a couple of things have happened. My first recruiting class is now comprised of either redshirt juniors or seniors. So we have a really important element in place now, and that's natural leadership. That's just something that's irreplaceable. And as a program matures and evolves, as a head coach, you just have to kind of wait patiently for that to happen. So now that those leaders are in place, it really changes the culture of the team, because now the message isn't coming so much from Coach Moore or me. It's coming from our leaders. And so that peer influence just makes all of the difference. And then it's just a matter of, breaking through competitively. 3 low place winners at the EIWA may not sound super impressive, but if you take that into perspective of my first 2 seasons leading this program, we didn't win a single individual match at the EIWA tournament. We didn't score a team point. So the last 2 years, we've taken 1 step up the team rankings each year, or the team standings. We had 1 place winner the year before. We moved that to 3 last year. And Elliot Antler last year was in a match. His match for 7th place was, the top 7 were automatic qualifiers. So we had a guy right there in the hunt. So we're really excited about everyone that we have returning. The collective attitude and energy of the program is really, really high. And the expectations, despite our past history, are very, very high for our guys.
Yeah, and then what's the status of Schuster coming back this year?
Yeah, torn labrum. Every wrestling coach that hears the L word now, labrum, just kind of cringes, because it's a nasty surgery, and the rehab process is really, really long. So, he had surgery in January, and he's finally at that point now where he's starting to make a lot of progress, and it's noticeable. I don't expect, though, that we'll have him for the beginning of the competitive season. We'll probably get him somewhere midway through the year.
Yeah, with those guys, you mentioned Antler, Gerald Daly at 125. I mean, you're seeing depth or actually you're seeing people start to emerge at different weight classes. It's not like you've got a cluster of, all right, you got two middleweights that are working together. You've got this balance throughout the lineup. And, going 2-15 last year in dual meets, I mean, people will, again, we'll look at 2-15 and be like, well, you guys suck. Well, no, 2-15 and the dual meet scores that you guys had, getting competitive. They're closer. You beat Bloomsburg, you beat Davidson. There were some matches that were ultimately competitive, 6-4s here and there. One match goes the other way. You could get 3 or 4 dual wins. And when you set benchmarks each year, how many duels you can win, and you set your schedule what is this year's schedule going to do, and how competitive is it going to be? Are you going to challenge it more? Could it be another 2-15 where you could be a lot better than your record indicates? Or are you looking to get a couple more dual meet wins out of this to draw some excitement around campus?
Oh yeah, we're super competitive. We want the wins without question. And it's a big part of the measure of progress. Yeah, we closed the gap a lot last year. We had 4 duels that were decided, by a single match, and another couple that were, with another match swing. So, this year we're kind of really hoping to tip the scales, especially with our entire roster returning. So it's one of those things, though, that, yeah, we're still young as a program. And is it possible that we have another, 2-15 dual meet season? Yeah, sure, that's possible. But if that's the case, we're still going to be closing the gap on those programs and chasing them down.
When you come in to Sacred Heart and you've got to recruit, and you've got, a record that's kind of indicative of where the program's been for a while, it may not be indicative of the work you've put in, but how do you entice recruits to come in and be like, yeah, we were 2-15 last year, but we're getting better? I mean, how do you convince a recruit and a parent to be like, look, we've got an opportunity here that you really can't pass up?
Well, the first thing I actually tell everyone, Jason, is that this is not a program for everybody. And I'm very, very transparent about who we are, about what our past is about, and most importantly, about the direction in which we're going. And I think it really takes someone with an entrepreneurial attitude to want to come and wrestle at Sacred Heart. You have a lot of options out there at the Division 1, 2, and 3 levels. And I think someone picks Sacred Heart because it's a unique story and they want an opportunity to put their signature on that story. I also think that Derek Moore is a huge reason why people pick come here, because, they can kind of follow his footsteps. And I think that's what drew him here, was the fact that he was, he had relatively, limited success in high school. He walked on to his team at the University of California, Davis. And then, he transformed himself into a undefeated national champion and outstanding wrestler. So if I'm a high school senior and I've had a decent or good high school career, I want to look to someone like that and say, okay, how can I frame my career after what Coach Moore's done?
I think that's a pretty good selling point right there. I mean, and plus you could also explain that Derek did all this with his mom yelling loudly through the arena everywhere he wrestled too, because, right there, Derek's mom was definitely the star of that national championship, other than giving up the first takedown and then, Derek getting the tech fall there against Ryan Lang. So I'll just always remember that about the Derek Moore story, is like, we can always hear his mom going, "We want more" in the background. So that's one thing you'll have to, when Derek's on the bike, just start going, "We want more," and see what he says.
Well, it's great. He got his MBA at Sacred Heart University, and he was actually chosen as the commencement speaker. So, his mom flew out to the commencement this past May, and I didn't know if we were going to have a conversation with her. Like, listen, you can't go and chant like that during, his speech.
So when we're looking at building the program, like you said, it takes a different type of athlete to want to go to Sacred Heart. And of course, there's still the niche student that goes there. It's the only Division I Catholic school in the country with wrestling. How much have you started to really play that aspect up in the landscape of Division I wrestling and recruiting?
I do think that it's important. It's an important mark of our identity. Now, you don't have to be Catholic to go to Sacred Heart University, and obviously you don't have to be Catholic to be recruited or to wrestle for us. But I do think, that the core values that line up with faith and spirituality are something that we're proud of. In terms of, the Catholic piece of identity, I'll be honest with you, one of the things that's really limited us in our lack of financial resources is the ability to go out and recruit the way that we want to recruit. Recruiting is one of the bigger budget lines when you look at the overall operation of a program. And that's one of the ways, or one of the areas that we've had to be really, really lean, just in terms of the amount of money that we have to travel to go see prospects, and then obviously the amount of money that we have to bring prospects to us and host official visits. So a big part of this campaign is designed to take dollars that we bring in and funnel it directly into our recruiting budget, so that now we can really strategically go after, some of these historically powerful Catholic high schools across the country, and try and use this identity point to leverage some of their best talent to come out to Fairfield, Connecticut.
Kind of borrow maybe the Notre Dame philosophy in football, even though I am not an Irish fan by any means in any way, shape, or form when it comes to football. But that's one of their draws. In St. Thomas, which is a very large Catholic institution here in the St. Paul, Minneapolis Twin Cities area, is one of the largest Division III athletic programs in the country. They get that draw as well. So you look at their roster and you've got it's littered with Catholic high schools from around the Midwest. So, and there's no shortage of those in the Northeast. Now, when we're also looking at the Northeast, you're dealing with the academic schools like, you've got the Ivies, then you've got your prestigious schools like, Bucknell in Pennsylvania, your service academies. They're all the same type of kids that you're looking for at Sacred Heart. When you say it's a different type of kid that has to go to Sacred Heart, what different type of kid do you have to recruit to make sure that they're like, all right, well, Harvard or Sacred Heart? I mean, how do you convince them to, if they've got, they got the grades to go Ivy, chances are they've got the grades to go to Sacred Heart. So, I mean, it's academically, it's challenging with so many competitive schools up there with that type of student.
It certainly is. Yeah. This region is littered with great academic institutions. I think the one thing that really differentiates Sacred Heart University is the youth of the institution. It has only been a 4-year residential college since the early 1990s. So it's in a position right now where it's growing tremendously. Each year that I've been here, the student population has grown exponentially. Our physical campus is rapidly growing through, new buildings being constructed and the acquisition of new land to add on to our campus. And so the final piece that kind of complements that growth is the overall academic profile of the institution. So as you look at all the reports right now, you just see Sacred Heart rising and bubbling into another atmosphere of better schools and better competition. U.S. News World and Report just came out last week, and it's ranked as one of the fastest growing Catholic institutions in the country. So the academic profile continues to improve. And then our geographic positioning is fantastic. So in an effort to complement, career development opportunities, being positioned an hour north of New York City, 2 hours outside of Boston, 45 minutes from Hartford, Connecticut, gives kids a lot of great career opportunities.
As we look forward to the future of Sacred Heart Wrestling, and what things have you done in the last 4 years? As you said earlier, you took over the worst Division I program in the country, and that's not being nice about it. That's being rather matter of fact, because the only team Sacred Heart were beating, actually they weren't beating, were American International in Division II and maybe a Division III school. And that was, there was a stretch where it was like, I don't know, would you have a 27, 28 dual meet losing streak at one point?
No, it was more 40. Yeah, 40 plus.
Yeah, it was bad.
Over 2 years. Yeah. It was bad.
So now, that culture, you said you've got your recruiting class, and to turn that around, you said it's a young school. The wrestling program's only been around since, I believe, 1999. So there's not a huge alumni fan base there that knows much about winning, save Payam Zaranpur. So, when you take this over, you say you like challenges. You mentioned the bike ride and why you took this job. From a wrestling landscape at the Division I institution, I asked you this question last year. I'm going to ask the question again. Why does the nation's wrestling fan base need to pay attention to schools like Sacred Heart, and specifically schools that are Sacred Heart?
Well, because if we don't take a position to advance schools like Sacred Heart and find creative avenues so that we can grow these programs, we'll be without these programs. And that could have a snowball effect that we want to avoid. So I think that the institutions that have wrestling programs that are struggling, we need to embrace those programs. We need to protect them. We need to preserve them, and we need to grow them. And so what I've really kind of tried to do through these last two campaigns is ask for the help of the wrestling community. Hopefully open up your heartstrings a little bit and put your arms around this comeback story, because I believe that this can be a blueprint for other programs who are in similar situations, who have similar challenges and struggles that we do. And there are going to be programs that come after Sacred Heart University as we continue to get better and move up the ranks of the Division I community, who find themselves in vulnerable situations.
Yeah, as we look at, I will sit with, actually, speaking of St. Thomas, a buddy of mine up here actually played football at St. Thomas, wrestled in high school, and I was wearing, after last year's episode, you'd sent me a Sacred Heart shirt or two. My wife had commandeered one, I commandeered the other. Well, basically, she gets all the good stuff that comes in. I basically, when Princeton sends me a batch of shirts, all the good stuff is now in her drawers, and I get what's left. And so I wear the Sacred Heart wrestling shirt out to lunch one day, and then my buddy Joe comes in, and he goes, "Oh, what's that?" And he it's like, "What's that? Some small school?" I was like, "No, it's actually the only Division I Catholic school with wrestling." He goes, "Where is it?" I was like, "It's Sacred Heart in Fairfield, Connecticut." He goes, "All right, it's my new favorite college wrestling program." So you did pick up a fan just because of the whole Catholic thing right there anyway.
That's fantastic. I hear stories like that all the time. And that really makes me smile, because that's how this starts. It's something that happens on the grassroots levels like that. And then it just advances and advances and propels itself forward until it's something huge.
So again, I'm talking to Andy Lausier, head wrestling coach at Sacred Heart University. He is set for spinning to St. Louis, which will kick off in not that long from now, Andy. We're talking, where are we at? September 19th. You're getting on a bike going over 1,000 miles to St. Louis to raise money for the program. If you're interested in Andy's journey and supporting Sacred Heart Wrestling and their fundraiser, a very unique fundraiser for the sport of wrestling, go to riding4wrestling.com. There is a donate now button. You can scroll down. You see one right in the middle. Obviously, you got a couple of sponsors there, getcarter.com and Compound Teamwear at cmpteamwear.com. They're also a sponsor of this show. So Cliff Fretwell and his crew, big thanks for the props on this show and for the props for Andy up at Sacred Heart. So Andy, in the time we got left, any final thoughts about this season upcoming? What can fans expect? What do you got on plan for home duels, things of that nature?
Yeah, this is just a really exciting way to kick off the year. I think we finished last year on such a strong note, having our best performance ever at the EIWA Championships. In addition to that, we also were recognized as an all academic team. We recorded the second highest ranked grade point average in the nation among all Division I programs. So we finished the year on a really great note, and we're transitioning off to a great start. I have such unbelievably high expectations for this program. I believe with every ounce of my spirit, fiber, and soul that Sacred Heart will transform into the program that I see. I just know that it really takes the help and generosity of the great people of the wrestling community.
Once again, riding4wrestling.com, the hashtag spinning, the number 2 St. Louis. Andy, always a pleasure having you on. Good luck this season.
Yeah, thanks so much. You can be expecting some super sweet Compound gear that's got Riding for Wrestling and Spinning to St. Louis all over coming your way.
All right, well, I don't do it for the gear, but hey, I will gladly accept such fundraising apparel from this. They're from one of my sponsors, so I guess it's cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do, Jason.
Things I am not going to do for 100, Alex, what is ride 1,000 miles on a bike. Yeah, anyway, but Andy Lausier doing some great things up there at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. Connecticut's only Division I wrestling program and the only Catholic Division I wrestling program in the country. Trying to move the needle, trying to think outside the box. So a lot of thanks to Andy for spending his time to come on the program today. Now, at the beginning of the program, you heard me play a promo for International Podcast Day. And in case you're wondering, yes, that is exactly as nerdy as it sounds. In case you're wondering, folks, yes, I'm not always involved in wrestling all the time. I'm putting out 10 to 14 podcasts and hosting them and coordinating this network means I'm going to spend some time in the podcast space and with podcasters and talk about podcasting and watch, Roadhouse. Never mind. That's a Ron White line. But anyway, International Podcast Day is coming September 30th. And as we release this on September 13th, that gives you about 2 weeks to help me out here. There are a few things I ask you to do when you listen to this program. If this is your first time listening to this program and it's on the web, you're listening on the web right there on matttalkonline.com, or you're listening through the player on Twitter or on Facebook, I'd ask you to go to matttalkonline.com/get short time. Now, if you've got iTunes on your machine, it'll take you right there. If you've got this on your smartphone, it'll take you right to the iTunes store. You can subscribe right there, one push to the iTunes or whatever, your iOS device to subscribe to this show there. Now, if you don't want to do that and you want to get your own app and it's not going to charge you anything, if you've got an iOS device but you don't like iTunes, go to matttalkonline.com/iOS. That's the free Matt Talk Online app for the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. The same thing, matttalkonline.com/Android for the free Android device. Now, once you've subscribed to the show, I'm going to express my gratitude to you by saying thank you. Thank you for subscribing. Those who have already done this, thousands of people each month. Yes, I know. Thank you. You rock. You rock. You rock. Now, back to this word gratitude, International Podcast Day. So that is September 30th, and I will be part of a 24-hour stream. We're doing some podcast nerdery type things because this medium is growing. As you've seen in wrestling, a couple years ago, we had 3. Now we've got over 40, and we're seeing new shows being added all the time. You can go to matttalkonline.com/directory and see all of those various podcasts. Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do for me. And you've got until September 27th to do this. And I'm going to sweeten the pot here, too. I'm going to tell you what I want you to do, and then I'm going to sweeten the pot for you afterwards. So there is a International Podcast Day Gratitude Award that basically gets awarded to a set show that has a lot of reviews in iTunes through one of the sponsored companies, and that's called My Podcast Reviews. And this particular company tracks all the podcast reviews worldwide. 155 countries, not every country, but every country that's got an iTunes store. So if you're listening in Zimbabwe, you can help me out. If you're listening in Saipan, if you're listening in Hong Kong, if you're listening in Tasmania, if you're listening in Bhutan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, you can actually participate with this. So what I would like you to do is write a review about how this podcast has impacted your life, especially if you're listening from outside the U.S. Now, I don't expect this show to be like super impactful in terms of it's changed my life, it's made me a better person. You know what? If it has, awesome. That's the stuff I want to hear. Now, if it's just made you a better wrestling fan, if it's helped you follow another program, if it's helped you go to one extra match a year, I would like you to tell me about this. Leave a review by going to either the iTunes store at matttalkonline.com/getshorttime or to the Stitcher store. That's if those of you familiar with that program can do so by going to matttalkonline.com/listen to Stitcher. That's T-O. Listen to Stitcher. STITCHER. So you can go to the iTunes store or go to Stitcher and leave a review. Like I said, if this show has impacted you in any way, positively, or even if it's ruined your life, tell me about it. Leave a rating and a review, and that way this show, the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, will be up for the International Podcast Day Gratitude Award, which gets presented on September 30th. Again, your votes and your ratings and reviews are open until September 27th. So as you listen to this on September 12th or September 13th, I'm releasing it whenever, really, I feel like it. But you got about 2 weeks to leave a rating and review on either iTunes or Stitcher for this program. Now, I'm going to sweeten the deal. Out of everybody that leaves a rating and review, and I'm not bribing you here, but I'm going to show you my gratitude. So I'm going to pick 2 winners from everybody that puts in a bid from September 13th, not a bid, a review from September 13th through September 27th. You're going to get the digital Fargo Almanac. You're going to get the digital NCAA preview guide for 2017. Now, you won't get that immediately because that's got to be done first, but I'll put your name down. You will get an advanced copy. You'll get not an advanced copy. You'll get a copy of the digital preview guide, which is over 250 pages. I'll also throw in a nice tri-blend Matt Talk Online t-shirt, which typically is only reserved for patrons of this program, and Eric Sanders and Henry Cejudo, which you saw on NBC during the Olympics. Yeah, Eric Sanders was rocking a Matt Talk shirt on TV during the Olympic Games. So leave a rating and review for Short Time. Yes, I'm belaboring this point here. But this is a gratitude award. Now, I've actually done quite a bit of things for the podcast community here recently, and they've been really good to me because I think after the Olympic Games, I went through and went back and listened to a bunch of my shows that I listened to, and a lot of podcast nerd shows, and a lot of them mentioned the fact that I was announcing the Olympics, and they didn't have to do that. And these are some people that I've met at conferences and just generally been a really, really, really good community to be part of. They're a real tight-knit like the wrestling community. So they've been great to me, and I would like to show them that the wrestling community actually cares about podcasting. So, yes, I would like to win the gratitude award, but it is your gratitude that I seek. So this is not about me. This is about you showing the podcast community that, guess what? There's a reason we've got 30 to 40 more shows in this space in 2 years. So, again, rating and review. Review is the most important thing. For iTunes or your iOS devices, MattTalkOnline.com/GetShortTime. That takes you right to the iTunes store. If you're on an Android device or you don't like iTunes and you want to use Stitcher, go to MattTalkOnline.com/listen-to-Stitcher and leave your rating and review there. International podcast reviews and all those things are calculated by My Podcast Reviews, which is a company sponsoring this award. So that is my spiel for that. Not really done yet because I'm also still giving myself more work to do. MattTalkOnline.com, in the top right corner, you'll see the menu of the college results, scores, and schedules. Yes, I'm putting this together by myself. Yet again, I've already got some California Community College wrestling scores in there. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a chart. It's going to be broken out by division when you get to the schedules. Now, on the side, when you hit the scores, you can actually sort that by division. So right now, only the California Community Colleges because they're the only ones wrestling right now. Yep, that season up and rolling. Bakersfield Duels kicked it off. Cerritos out from Southern California went 4-0 on the day to open up their season. A couple other wins there. So California Community College, we're going to be talking about them later in the year, but we've got results. I'm building all the schedules as they are being released. We've got about over 100 teams are in the schedule portal on MattTalkOnline.com. So that's a place where you can check out your results and schedules and an easy way to find them. And I will, this year, be a glutton for punishment and linking back to the results. Last year, I just charted them. I'll have the standings again this year and all of that for free. Now, all of that stuff is for free, and I'm going to ask you for something else here. So if you do like this show, if you've subscribed, and then you've left me a review for the Gratitude Award, and you're hopeful to get that T-shirt and all that stuff, well, easy way to get the T-shirt and all that other stuff is by becoming a patron of this program at MattTalkOnline.com. So to do that, you can go to MattTalkOnline.com/join the team. There's a link there that'll take you to Patreon. That is where you can contribute a set amount per month for this program. Now, I mentioned last show that Flips Wrestling had pivoted. Yes, it was a release that came out. So Flips Wrestling is now known as Scrap Life. They are no longer a sponsor of this program as they're going through basically some reorganization and figuring out their role and how they're going to do with marketing. So again, no more Flips sponsor of this program. And Don Bishada and his crew, Rocco, they've been great. We're on good terms. Nothing's bad. This is not like they're unhappy. They're just going through a pivot. But what this does, though, is it leaves Short Time in a little bit of a lurch. So this is where I'm making a little bit more of a push for this show to be listener supported. And again, those perks, you can go to that Join the Team page and you click the Patreon link. You'll see a level of giving and then certain perks that come with it. Shirts, draft glasses, things, the guides, the digital preview guides and things of that nature. That's what's going to keep the lights on for this show. The other shows, yeah, they're paid for, they're taken care of. But if you like the network, you like this show and the Hall of Fame show specifically are going to be the beneficiaries of your generosity. So if you're going to sit there and listen to this for thousands of hours of all the time, and hey, if it's worth $1 a month to you, if 15 to 20 shows, 15 to 20 hours of your month is worth $1, hey, give me $1. If it's worth $10, thank you. There's different levels, and I appreciate everybody that's done so. Actually, I failed to mention that we did get a new review as I was talking about International Podcast Day. That one actually counts. So St. Pete Hokie, you are now in the mix. Thank you for your 5-star rating and review. Also, Patreon-wise, 3 new members of the team, Chris Barnes, Kevin Powers, and Mark Kozik. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Actually, I remember watching Kozik wrestle in high school at Camden Catholic, so I've actually known who that guy is for a long time. Kevin Powers, you've been a big supporter for a long time. Chris Barnes, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're going to get some cool stuff in the mail soon, sir. So Chris Barnes is the next guy that's hitting that tier where he's going to get some stuff. So thank you, folks. That's all I've got for this episode. Next episode, you'll want to hear this one. Lou Roselli, head wrestling coach at the University of Oklahoma, recorded on September 12th. So that whole Kyle Snyder news that's circling around about the UFC, yeah, we're not really going to get to that because we've already recorded that interview. But guess what? Sweet Lou is cleaning no man's... Never mind. I just quoted a terrible movie, The Grind. Anyway, but Lou Roselli will be here on the next episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. So for now, I've got a crying 2-month-old upstairs. My daughter's coming home from preschool. That's all I've got. I've got no more time today, but I do want to thank you for spending your time with me because you've always got time for Short Time. No bad movie lyrics sang here.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.